Hello, everyone. This is Tim from the Bedtime Battle Podcasters, and I just wanted to bring you a bonus episode this week of some content that I'm going to call Quick Snap Recap. This week, I want to bring to you some notable wide receiver week one snap percentages, and I am going to be providing fantasy points provided by some wide receivers, and they will be based on half point PPR scoring. So this is a segment that I wanted to start talking about just because I think it's super important to be thinking about how often players are on the field. I think a lot of times we'll just look at the fantasy points from one week and we'll make gut reactions. We'll see one player has 20 points, one player has 2 points, and we automatically vault that player with 20 points up to the top of our boards. And we want to just quickly forget that player with 2 points. And this is even more important in the beginning of the year as we kind of establish who is going to be on the field more and just remembering that we can't just base everything off of the first week. So I'm going to run through 6 teams that I noticed some notable wide receiver information on, and I'm going to share that with you and just some quick insights. The idea that this is the idea of this quick snap recap is that it's quick and short and doesn't take too much time for you to consume. And hopefully I'm able to do some of the hard work for you by going through all the snap percentages of teams, because even though that's easy content to access, sometimes it can take time just to go through every single team. So let's go ahead and get started. First team I wanted to look at, the Raiders, and you might be wondering yourself, well, we know Davante Adams is there, and you are absolutely right. Davante Adams is there. He completely dominated on targets. We do not need to talk about his usage. He will be a high usage wide receiver like he always has been. But I wanted to talk about something that I noticed and had no um no thoughts on, and I realized I swapped the photos. So sorry, this is my first time doing this, but um Mac Hollins, he is a journeyman. He has started out in the Eagles, bounced around. I believe he went to the Dolphins for a little while, and now apparently he's on the Raiders, which I was not aware of. And what stood out to me was Mac Hollins had a higher snap percentage than Hunter Renfrow. He was on the field for 88% of the snaps, and I think that's a key stat to be thinking of because they were trailing the Chargers a majority of this game. So even though we kind of always think of Hunter Renfrow as the number two guy, and there's been a lot of questions about, what is he going to do even with Darren Waller and Devontae Adams. Matt Collins is apparently in play for the Raiders wide receiver two position. And, this might be an anomaly this week just because, again, they were playing from behind. But I think it's something just to note. Matt Collins is a guy who's probably available in every league out there. So if you're in a deeper league, he might be worth grabbing just to see how week two plays out. I believe they play the Cardinals, so that's another high scoring opportunity for the Raiders where they could be throwing a lot, and it'd be interesting to see if Matt Collins is out there again. Uh, I didn't want to dive too much into this team, but Matt Collins and Hunter Renfrow both scored below 4 point fantasy points. Hunter Renfrow had 3.6. Matt Collins had 2.1. But again, this is just something to keep an eye on. I don't know how valuable the Raiders, you know, receiving option number 3 is going to be, assuming Devontae Adams and Darren Waller are healthy, but something to keep an eye on. The second one I wanted to look at is the New York Jets. So we know Elijah Moore is there. We know they drafted Garrett Wilson. They have Corey Davis. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that Elijah Moore had 89% of the snaps, and Corey Davis was the next one with 68%. So we know Flacco is there right now. Not sure when Zach Wilson's coming back, but Elijah Moore was clearly the number one receiver, which was the news in the preseason. We weren't sure what Garrett Wilson was going to be doing, but it looks like as of right now, Corey Davis is the number 2. We could easily see Garrett Wilson jump into that. I believe his percentage was not much lower, but Elijah Moore looks to be on the field most of the plays. This is a scenario where I just want to point out, if you were just looking at fantasy points, you'd be like, oh, Corey Davis, 10.7 points, Elijah Moore, only 7.4 points, but Elijah Moore is clearly going to have the opportunities over time, and he's going to be on the field for most of the passing plays and other plays as well. So the third team is the Saints. So I wanted to actually break down the entire wide receiver trio, specifically looking at Chris Olave. Jarvis Landry had 14.9 points. He had a huge game yardage wise. Michael Thomas had 20.2 fantasy points. He had multiple touchdowns. They both on the fantasy stat sheet were dominant. Chris Olave had 7.6 points, so still respectable for his first game as a NFL receiver. But percentages, Chris Olave actually led the trio. He had 74%, and Jarvis Landry had 72%. Michael Thomas only had 61%. So just something to keep an eye on. It looks like Chris Olave is getting involved early, and he should continue to have opportunities. So don't rule him out quite yet. If you saw that he was the third receiver with points wise, again, week 2, going to be exciting to see how they use him and if they try and get the ball to him more often. The fourth one, the San Francisco 49ers wide receivers. We all know Deebo Samuel. He is the man. He had an amazing season last year. He would have been the number 1 receiver last year in fantasy if Cooper Kupp hadn't gone completely bonkers. Deebo Samuel had a respectable showing this first week in a very, very rainy weather game where I believe Chicago got something like 4 to 6 inches of rain that day. So not really high passing volume. Trey Lance only had 13 completions total. I know they got the ball to Deebo Samuel in the rushing game as well. He had 11.6 fantasy points. So not going to knock Deebo Samuel at all. I will be interested to see how they incorporate him into the rushing game now that Elijah Mitchell is out for 8 weeks at least. But Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel had 82% snap percentage. Brandon Ayuk had 99% snap percentage. There was one play that he was not on the field. So even though he had 5.7 points, I believe it was 2 catches for 40 yards and a 7-yard rush as well, he only had 2 targets. So again, it was a low passing game. Trey Lance's, he's supposedly the guy. It was rainy weather. They were down. It was kind of just a weird matchup in general when you considered all aspects. To me, the thing that stands out the most is Brandon Ayuk was out there for almost every single play. So week 2, they're going up against the Seahawks. This should be give us a more clear vision of what Brandon Ayuk could be doing for this team if we see Trey Lance getting a full passing volume and more favorable weather in San Francisco, so that his completion percentage goes up. I would be shocked if Brandon Ayuk has a worse showing than he had in that rainy weather. So he's a big guy to keep an eye on. He might be a good buy low candidate. People might be frustrated with him. I know people have had him in the past. He had a really rough start last year. If you're looking for a receiver that you need help on, but you don't want to pay too much, Brandon Ayuk is probably not a bad guy to go try and get right now, just purely based off that 99% snap percentage. He's clearly part of their game plan. He's clearly the number 2 guy. And if Deebo is called upon for more rushing work, Brandon Ayuk could be the number 1 target, especially if we continue to see George Kittle out, and it's not looking good for him again this coming week. All right, the Buffalo Bills. Gabe Davis truthers out there were very excited to see early on in the game Gabe Davis getting peppered with targets by Josh Allen. Stephon Diggs is the guy. He's the higher draft capital. The snap percentage was shocking to me. I know they completely obliterated the Rams, and so we can't look too much into this. On Stephon Diggs' side of things, he had 64% of the snaps, 20.2 fantasy points, which is amazing. So I know I'm a Diggs owner and a couple sorry, I'm not going to say owner. I know we're trying to steer away from that. I have Diggs on a couple rosters, and I was stoked to see him just light up the scoreboard. But Gabe Davis, 98% of the snap percentage. So, I know that he was probably one of those players in the preseason that we did not know which way it was going to go. Was he going to fulfill that 6th round draft capital? He was skyrocketing. So far, it's looking good for him. He had 16.8 points. Again, 98% snap percentage. That's huge. Diggs, 34% more than Diggs. Again, this was a game that we can't read too much into that difference. Diggs was probably getting a lot of rest. Rams weren't doing anything, but definitely it shows me that Gabe Davis is here to stay. And I think that he is a solid wide receiver too for the Bills. And I don't think there's anyone close to contending with them. So congratulations, all those people who, you know, went out, got Gabe Davis, and might be getting a deal on him that some were worried they wouldn't be getting because of what you had to draft him at. And last one that I wanted to go over, the Eagles, my highest drafted player, not the highest. I'm a big Dameon Pierce truther, but we don't need to talk about that right now. Maybe I'll talk about that if he actually starts doing better. But we're here to talk about wide receivers. One of my highest drafted wide receivers was Devonta Smith because of how late I was able to get him. As a rookie, I think he was getting drafted in the 7th or 8th round. And this year, after a strong rookie season, he was getting drafted a little bit later than that in a lot of leagues. I was getting him in the 8th and 9th rounds, sometimes the 10th round. And I think so many people were afraid of the impact that AJ Brown was going to have on him. And if you just look at the stat sheet from fantasy, you would say that is absolutely correct. AJ Brown dominated. He had 13 targets, I believe. He had 20.5 fantasy points. The Eagles were in a shootout with the Lions. They won 38-35. There was no reason to slow down. And so a lot of people are going to see Devonta Smith that he got 4 targets. He got 0 points. That was rough. I know I started him in a lot of places and he gave a big old goose egg. And these are the situations where coming into the season, when there's already a fear about his usage now that AJ Brown is there, how are the Eagles going to get both players the ball? I think a lot of people are going to jump ship early. This is the type of player that might be on your waivers because people just don't want to deal with this. But based on the snap counts, you got to go get them. 96% of the snap counts in a game that was back and forth most of the game. No reason to rest top players. AJ Brown had 87%. He probably needed some rest, and that's why his number's a little lower than Devonta Smith. But man, Devonta Smith was out there on almost every single play. We saw the Eagles offense can do it. They can produce. Jalen Hurts can get the ball to AJ Brown at least, and hopefully he can get it to Devonta Smith too. But this right here is why I love looking at snap percentages. I just looked at the stat sheet on Sunday. I didn't see any of the game, and I wondered if Devonta Smith was even playing, because that's what you do when you see the stat sheet. You only wonder if they're playing based on when you see receptions. But yes, Devonta Smith was out there. Yes, he was out there a lot. Don't worry, hang in there. Maybe you need to bench him because we got to see how he does in week 2, but they are going to be playing the Minnesota Vikings. There's no reason this can't be another shootout with the Vikings having obliterated the Packers in like the first quarter and Justin Jefferson setting off crazy numbers and not even having to play basically the second half. So the Vikings are going to be out there throwing. The Eagles are going to have to be keeping up with them or vice versa. Either way, I can't imagine another goose egg performance from Devonta Smith. And if he's out there that much, and the Vikings are going to obviously be covering AJ Brown more because of what he did, I think it's a good opportunity and a bounce back chance for Devonta Smith, knowing that he's already going to be on the field. So that's all I got for there. There's my quick snap recap. Hopefully it was about 10 minutes. That was my goal, but I will be bringing you content like this every week. Week 1, I chose to look at wide receivers only because I think that there's a lot more discrepancy and curiosity around receivers and the pecking order. Typically running backs, we have a general idea. That being said, there were a few running back numbers that I'm happy to share with you that stood out to me. Darrell Henderson had 82% of the snaps compared to Cam Akers, who had 18%. I know a lot of you were pushing the panic button on Cam Akers, and that might be valid. However, that being said, like we talked about, the Bills were just crushing them on Thursday. So maybe don't completely write off Cam Akers and drop him, but But if Daryl Henderson is out there on the waiver still, he's worth grabbing. Another one that stood out to me, I know James Robinson was kind of uh, doing better fantasy wise than Travis Etienne. Word on the street is that James Robinson is the number one guy. That being said, they were almost 50-50 on snap percentage. So don't worry yet about Etienne, but James Robinson, after that Achilles injury, came out strong. So two situations to monitor where people might get frustrated with Akers and Etienne if they don't show up as well fantasy wise. So that's all I got tonight. It's going to be time to turn off the lights here. The kids are asleep, the wife is asleep, and my bedtime is nearing. So, once again, this is Tim from the Bedtime Battle Podcasters. I hope this content was useful for you and that it can help you make some decisions in this coming week. Have a wonderful night, everyone.